Buenos días, hoy nos acompaña el gran Costas Christ. Es un honor para nosotros estar con él, una de las autoridades más importantes en el tema de turismo sostenible en el mundo. Cuando no se oía hablar sobre el tema del ecoturismo, él ya lo estaba poniendo en la mesa hace muchos años. Es un autor viajero incansable y un autor de numerosos reportajes, crónicas, artículos, documentales sobre estos temas, consultor internacional de jefes de Estado y de compañías en el mundo sobre estos temas. Y para Colombia resulta un personaje muy importante en la medida en que en el 2017 recibió un premio, el Premio Internacional de la Paz a través del turismo, por su colaboración en temas de desarrollo de turismo sostenible en el marco del proceso de paz durante el gobierno de Juan Manuel Santos. Entonces, con él, hoy, en el Día Mundial del Turismo, le damos la bienvenida. Es un honor para nosotros estar con él. Muchísimas gracias, Costas. Welcome to Más Colombia, and thank you for being with us.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, and greetings to all of your readers and listeners, and happy to have this conversation.
Okay, so let's start with the first question. Costas, could you please tell us, to your knowledge, what are the main challenges Latin American countries face today in the implementation of sustainable tourism and travel?
There's probably not one single answer, but there is an important answer. And it's not just what is countries in Latin America face, but I would say it's really what countries around the world are facing in the context of how to effectively transition to sustainable tourism in a positive way for their destination. This is my answer, that the tourism boards of countries and the national governments of countries, even the tourism boards of municipalities and states, of course, they want tourism, but we need to change how we measure success. Right now, success is solely measured on numbers of people and numbers of visitors. The more numbers go up, everyone claps their hands and says we're succeeding. But that metric must change. Rather than considering success based on the numbers of increasing tourism, we should base success on the impact tourism is having in the destination to improve people's lives, protect nature, and of course, celebrate and recognize cultural heritage. In other words, success in tourism is measured on how it is giving back to nature, uplifting local people's livelihoods, and benefiting cultural heritage. And by the way, those are often the very things that tourists come to see to begin with. So we have to measure success based on the positive impacts of tourism, not just on numbers of growth.
I imagine, Costas, that implies also the possibility of having this diagnosis and these measures available. I mean, is it easy to measure these indicators?
10 years ago, I would have told you, well, we're still working on ways to measure that. Today, I'm happy to tell you, we know how to measure it. There are tools now within United Nations, World Tourism Organization, Global Sustainable Tourism Criteria, and others at the destination level for destinations to be able to determine the positive impact of tourism and to mitigate and lessen any negative impact. One thing we know is that when tourism goes up, it doesn't always mean good. And when tourism goes down, it doesn't always mean good. What we need to measure is the effect it's having on the environment and people's life. And when that effect is good, we know that tourism is contributing positively to the destination. And yes, there are tools available today at the destination level to allow those things to be measured.
In your opinion, Costas, how far is Colombia from these sustainable practices? And what have we done? What have we done right, and what have we done wrong? And what can we do to improve?
Well, the first thing I want to say is just how much I enjoy and really have come to love the country of Colombia. And I say that because Colombia has so many gifts. Every Colombian, and I know they are proud of their country, but every Colombian should be particularly proud because the country itself represents some of the most richest biodiversity in the world, an incredible amount of cultural diversity and geographic diversity. You could almost say the entire world is in one country called Colombia. That's how much diversity is in Colombia. So what does that mean? It means to me that not only the world, but especially Colombians have an extra responsibility to protect that heritage for their own future generations of Colombians and the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of those today, but also in terms of the responsibility to our planet. So in the context of Colombia, I think that the country has come a long way, and we'll talk a little bit about that now. When I first traveled to Colombia, I think about 8 or 9 years ago, Colombia was really at the very initial stages of trying to understand tourism. And well, let me rephrase that. Not trying to understand tourism, but Colombia was trying to begin to understand sustainable tourism and what does sustainable tourism mean for a destination. Traditionally, the country was following what I would call a typical tourism development path. You could see this reflected in certain popular destinations, whether it's San Andreas with big resorts, some of the areas around coastal areas, you know, kind of mass tourism style. That was then. Today, Colombia has made a lot of progress. Is it a global model of sustainable tourism? Not yet. Is it getting there? Yes. What do we need to get there? We need to recommit on the part of the public and the private sector and look at policies and also look at how to attract the correct investment that will advance the principles of sustainable tourism, which are based on environmentally friendly. We don't destroy the environment, damage the environment, we help it. 2, the protection of cultural and natural heritage. And 3, the social and economic well-being of local people. Those are the foundation of sustainable tourism. Those are the issues I believe Colombians care deeply about as well.
Costas, there has been a discussion in Colombia regarding, since we have so many national parks, if sustainable hotels or sustainable hotel infrastructure should be allowed to be inside these national parks or protected areas. There are ones who say yes, there are ones who say no. What is your take on this?
Is the following, okay? In a perfect world, every country would have the budget they need to protect the national parks, give it all the funding necessary to ensure illegal activities are not happening in those parks, make sure that other behaviors and conservation and research and studies are being funded, that there are vehicles and there are radios and there are staff that are paid well. That's a perfect world. Well, guess what? In the United States, we can't accomplish that. Our national park system in the United States doesn't have the funding it needs. And here's something else. I don't know another country in the world, including Colombia, that has the funding it needs. I know that the national park authorities in Colombia have requested additional funding. But like any national government, just like the United States, they don't always get what they want. And funding is difficult. So here's my answer, okay, to your question. We need tourism and we need the private sector to also invest in and support the protection of our national parks. In Africa and also in other Latin American countries, as well as in other regions of the world, what we have done successfully is the following. Don't make one policy that says No hotels can ever be inside a national park. And don't make a policy that says hotels can always be allowed in national parks. Take the middle path and do it on a case-by-case basis. There are some national parks where tourism or development inside should not happen. And there are others where tourism and development inside the national park will advance its protection. I am a firm believer that we need to have the flexibility based on science, based on economic need, and based on the budgets that national park authorities have to allow for sustainable tourism development inside parks. It has been successful in many parts of the world. I believe that Colombia should adopt a policy case by case. There are over 50 Colombian national parks. Look at each one individually and make a decision as to whether developing a sustainable or eco lodge inside that national park will advance the goals of the National Park Service for conservation and protection and advance the goals of the government to provide economic livelihood for the people who live closest to those areas. We need sustainable tourism to accomplish that.
Costas, you've explained the importance of tourism led by local communities. Can you please give us an example, a concrete and specific example of how tourism can change the life of a community for the better? And what exactly did that community do right? Well,
one thing that we've learned, both, we were talking a moment ago about national parks, but also just in tourism in general. And I want to come back to remembering a key thing, if you'll allow me. Think for a moment, what do people travel for? I mean, yes, we have lots of personal reasons. And what does the tourism industry sell? Really? No, the tourism industry, yes, we have nice guest service and beautiful rooms and all that kind of thing. But tourism sells two things, the foundation of the tourism industry, nature and culture. That's what this industry sells. That's its product. So my argument is that an industry that in 2019 employed 1 out of 10 people on the planet, an industry that represents 10% of global domestic revenue, put it that, GDP, in terms of its economic clout, is basing that business model on nature and culture. If you're a traveler, and I'm sure many of the people watching this have traveled. When we go to travel, what do we think? A beautiful beach, an amazing jungle, a mountain, or a beautiful cultural site. Maybe it's the Eiffel Tower in France, whatever it might be. These are the things we go to. They're representing nature and culture. Carolina, and to those watching this, have you ever seen a tourism brochure, or have you ever met a traveler who told you this? I've just come back from a wonderful vacation in the Caribbean. I was on a beautiful island. It was fantastic. The beaches were covered with trash. There was plastic everywhere. The reefs were dead, and I went snorkeling and I saw nothing alive. I'm going back next year to the same place. No, you'll never hear that. The tourism industry always shows us beautiful pictures of nature, clean beaches, sparkling water, as if the world is this beautiful, pristine place. Well, the industry has a responsibility to protect those resources. Now, I'll pause a moment because I want to come back to your question on community. How do we protect those resources? Public-private partnerships. What is the most important lesson in the last 40 years, both in terms of conservation and successful tourism destination development? That lesson is this: unless the people who live closest to what you want to protect, unless the people who live closest in the very place you want to develop tourism are your partners and allies, you are going to have serious problems. Success of tourism will be complicated and more difficult. And in some cases, it won't succeed at all. So then how do local people become partners and allies? When they are included in the decision-making process, when local communities have a voice at the table, when they have the ability to also influence how tourism will affect their lives. In other words, when local communities become partners in tourism development that respects their heritage, that improves their way of life, that safeguards the beauty, nature, and culture, and provides for their livelihoods, then they become part of our success. So local communities are essential to successful, sustainable tourism development, including sometimes the rights of a community to say no. Indigenous communities in many parts of the world are involved in tourism. You asked me about examples. In Bolivia, Madidi Eco Lodge is inside Madidi National Park. It is one of the world's best examples and models of sustainable tourism at the community basis. It is owned and run by local community members. Was that easy to achieve? No. It takes time to develop the skills, the training to work in hospitality and to work in tourism. It took 5 years in that particular project. Now the community owns and runs it. Okay, that's an example of an indigenous community. In the country of Ireland, a region of the country is called the Burren, Burren. Local communities came together and created the Burren Ecotourism Network. That network was designed after local villagers and community members became concerned that there were no jobs for youth, and the youth were all going to cities, and the small villages and towns were losing their heritage. Youth weren't staying. They were leaving to go to the capital cities because there was no economic opportunity. This community network brought back the development of traditional skills, guiding small businesses that has now resulted in young people investing and staying in their communities rather than going, in the case of Ireland, to the capital city of Dublin or over to London. Another example in South Africa. A group of women, in this case in a village, came together and created their own eco lodge, owned and managed by women. Okay, it's amazing. Let me tell you, do you know how they make your breakfast smoothie? On a bicycle blender where they get on it and they pedal, and it's renewable energy. It's a very popular place. That's another example of community-based tourism. So my point is, you said, what did they do to get it right? Collaboration, public, government, private, business, local, community members who have a voice and participate in the decisions of tourism development. That's the formula that we have seen very successful.
In Colombia, Costas, we have seen how this well-intentioned approach to tourism, that is the one that understands tourism in the face of the well-being and welfare of communities and the importance of local communities in the participation of tourism. But despite its benefits, which are undeniable, we have seen in Colombia also and in other places how this has backfired. In what sense? In the sense that local communities, even them, raise the life costs and other operators and business owners who develop things there have an effect, which is life cost is more expensive, and this forces people to leave and also locals to leave. What is your regard? What can you tell us that can be done in this regard?
What concerns me more, to be honest with you, are situations in which tourism development comes to an area and investment starts to follow, and it pushes up the cost of living to the degree, for example, that local workers who maybe are working in tourism, maybe they're guides, or maybe they're working in hotels, in the service industry, they cannot afford an apartment. They can no longer find a place to live because, I'm not an expert in the case of Cartagena, but we've seen this also in Cartagena, you know, in the old city. The point is that this is where I think government needs to be able to step in. In the state of California right now, in their most popular tourism destination, the local workers can no longer afford to live there because people have come and bought vacation homes and others have come and bought fancy places and things like that. So the local authorities, meaning the municipalities, the state, as well as federal government, are working together to create special housing in certain areas to ensure that these areas cannot go to just like whoever pays the most money in real estate, but these are designated areas for local people to be able to purchase and live. So this issue of how tourism can raise the cost of living is a real issue. And it's part of sustainable tourism planning to look at how do we make sure that tourism can prosper and local people can also prosper. And sometimes that means it's necessary for government and private sector to come in and ensure that local people have affordable housing and they have access also to, for example, to affordable food and other affordable transportation and so on. It's part of what we call destination visitor management and infrastructure development, meaning this is a work in progress. There's no magic formula, but we know there are ways to address this problem, cost of living increases that relate to tourism.